The terror group's missiles, rockets, and drones set fires on the Golan Heights and near the Sea of Galilee. Hezbollah launched the barrage after Israel assassinated one of its top commanders, whose ultimate goal was to conquer Jerusalem. Hezbollah is promising more attacks.
The series of responses is ongoing and will continue targeting new sites the enemy never imagined would be hit.
The ongoing assault could lead Israel to launch an all-out war on Hezbollah to enable some 80,000 residents who've been evacuated to return to northern Israel.
We know there is still a long way to go, but we are determined to restore security to the north and return the residents safely to their homes.
As war inches closer, both Hezbollah and its patron Iran are threatening to obliterate Israel. Netanyahu issuing this strong response.
We established a principle. Whoever harms us is marked for death. We put it into practice.
As for the ongoing conflict in Gaza, Turkey's president says Israel must be forced to end the war.
To end this destruction, Israel must be stopped and forced to accept a permanent ceasefire.
To that end, a number of Arab nations are seeking to isolate Israel by moving to freeze its participation in the United Nations.
A step like this step is what ended, brought down, and eliminated a colonial regime in South Africa.
In the meantime, Hamas has made amendments to a proposed ceasefire deal that could free many of the hostages now held captive in Gaza. The changes were enough to get Israel to send a negotiating team to renewed ceasefire talks. But there are conflicting reports on whether Hamas is ready to agree to a deal without a permanent end to the fighting and all Israeli troops out of Gaza. According to a New York Times report that cited unnamed sources, a number of top IDF generals are ready to give up the war on Hamas if it means freeing the hostages. Netanyahu is blasting the report.
I don't know who those unnamed parties are, but I'm here to make it unequivocally clear. It won't happen.
On July 4th, Netanyahu sent greetings and a message to the U.S. At their base, Israel and America are guided by the same twin insights. Freedom is the most precious gift humanity will ever know, and freedom isn't free. You have to be willing to fight for it.
I want to continue our coverage now with Chris Mitchell joining us from Jerusalem. So, Chris, Hezbollah promising more attacks. Is an all-out war considered a realistic possibility?
Well, Ephraim, yes, there is considered a very real possibility, and actually a lot of people have been thinking about that for months. But Hezbollah is sending mixed signals. Its number 2 deputy said that Hezbollah is not expecting an all-out war, but is ready for the worst. He said Hamas won't stop if Israel doesn't stop. And what they're doing, Ephraim, is Hezbollah is tying the war in the north with Israel to the war in Gaza between Hamas and Israel. You know, this is the second time that Hezbollah's number 2 has said something like this. But if you talk to many Israelis, they say that war with Hezbollah is inevitable. I'll give you one anecdote. Last night at a local restaurant, our server has been in Gaza and is part of an elite unit. And what he said to us last night at dinner, he said that many others like himself want to go to the north and finish the job with Hezbollah. They realize that they can't live with this kind of threat on its northern border indefinitely, and certainly with about 60, 80, maybe as many as 100,000 Israelis away from their homes, they can't have that. It's untenable in the long run.
If a war does break out, how likely is it that Iran would actually get involved?
I don't know if it's likely, but it is possible, and it's a major concern. Some believe that if Iran joins the war, that could even spread even further with other nations here in the Middle East. We do know that the head of the Iran's aerospace program recently, and we reported on this, he said they want to launch what they call Operation True Promise number 2. Operation True Promise number 1 was on April 13th when there was an attack of 350 projectiles against Israel, and that was the first direct attack on Israel since the Islamic Revolution. They admitted that Iran's supplying Hamas and Hezbollah, and then there's this war of words going on between Iran and Israel. About a week ago, Iran's minister at the UN vowed an obliterating war against Israel if it launched a full-scale offensive against Hezbollah. And then on the other hand, Israel's foreign minister, Israel Katz, responded, and he said if Hezbollah doesn't cease its fire and withdraw from southern Lebanon, Israel will act with full force so that thousands of Israelis that I mentioned can go back home. And he also said a regime that threatens destruction deserves to be destroyed. So this shows that, there's a war of words going on. And if Israel and Hezbollah go into an all-out war, it is possible that Iran would be a part of that.
Let's switch now gears a bit to the war against Hamas in Gaza. It seems to be winding down, but is there still some intense fighting going on?
There is fighting, Ephraim, in the north, the south, central Gaza. An IDF soldier was killed. That brings up about 325 IDF soldiers killed in the fighting so far. The IDF says they struck Hamas fighters in UN schools and used those schools to plan, direct, and carry out terror attacks. In those operations, they killed a number of terrorists, destroyed, they say, 100 terror sites while trying to mitigate harms to civilians. And they're saying Hamas is violating international law by using these civilian buildings and Palestinian civilians as human shields.
Chris, Israel is sending a delegation for more hostage talks. Does Israel think a deal might actually happen this time?
Well, it's possible. Defense Minister Golan said that we're closer to a deal than we've ever been. And there's a deal, he said, for possible phase 1. It's a 3-phase plan that they're working on, and one phase is dependent on the other. But there have been reports like this before. The question is, will Hamas move the goalpost like they have before? And it really comes down to the two main demands for Hamas. They want to end the war. They want the withdrawal of all IDF forces, and whether or not they will maintain those two core demands remains to be seen.
Chris, the Times of Israel is reporting a biblical IDF email that warned of the Hamas attacks days before October 7th. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Ephraim, the report says that a non-commissioned officer in the IDF warned her superiors just days before October 7th, and she used this term, the sword is coming, and wanted to warn the people while there was still time. There was also a dossier by the intelligence unit, 8200, that's one of the elite intelligence units here in Israel, warned that Hamas was training for a large-scale invasion. They even outlined what the Hamas plans were, and part of the email said the other side, which would be Hamas, is determined to carry out its plan. It would be painful and difficult fighting to be expected. However, the warnings were not heeded, Ephraim, and that led to the tragedy of October 7th.
Before we let you go, give us a preview of what's ahead on Jerusalem Dateline today.
Well, we're going to have an update on the situation up in the north and in the south, but we're updating one of our most important archaeological sites here in Israel, and that would be ancient Shiloh. They're literally digging up the Bible. They found what they believe may be the Holy of Holies, the ancient gate of Shiloh, bone deposits from animal sacrifices. And Ephraim, this is the place of the Bible where they're digging literally the Bible and the people of the Bible like Samuel the prophet, Joshua, and Hannah.
Oh, exciting stuff. Thank you so much, Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem. Thanks, as always, for your insights. Stay safe and know that we back here are praying for you and our entire team there in Israel. You, by the way, can see the latest on Jerusalem Dateline tonight on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 8 Eastern. You can also watch it on the CBN News app, or you could also find it on YouTube.